Hello and welcome to a special edition of Planet Waves FM. I'm Eric Francis Coppolino, the author of the Planet Waves column, host of Planet Waves FM, and your friendly neighborhood astrologer. Here with a special edition Starcast on the natal chart of Donald J. Trump. The Donald. We New Yorkers have known about Donald Trump for a long time, and most of us really didn't take him that seriously. I once had the honor of sharing the front page of the New York Daily News with the Donald. I wrote an article exposing a student government leader for spending $500,000 in student funds on things like limousines and room service at conferences and trips to Haiti and things like this. And Juan Gonzalez, I'm sure you've heard of him. He's the co-host of Democracy Now! We had someone on my team who knew him, and he came up to New Paltz and interviewed us. And so the very next day, the New York Daily News had on its cover, I wonder if I've got this someplace, I must have it, in huge letters to the left 2/3 of the front page, exclusive, CUNY's high roller, that being Jean Lamar. And then on the 1/3 column to the right, Trump's late date. Yes, Trump had a date with someone, and it made the front page of the Daily News, considered almost as important as a student government leader stealing, let's say, misappropriating $500,000. Now, the good part of that is that Jean Lamar did not have a career in politics. My intent in doing the story was to end Jean Lamar's career in politics. He has had a career as kind of a B-rate movie actor and quasi-director. Better to keep fucks like that in Hollywood. But Trump somehow went on to have a political career. And he had been talking about this at different times. But you know, Trump is a Tony Baloney. That's what that's what they're known as. Basically, you know, usually a Tony Baloney is an Italian guy who's all talk, but Trump is honorary, involved with the mob and all that stuff. So I am not going to trash the Donald in this chart, nor did I trash what's her name, Harris, in my previous reading. My personal feelings about him don't quite matter so much, although I think that he is at least an interesting presence on the political scene. And I think that is a lot of his appeal to people. We wonder, many of us wonder what the appeal could possibly be. And I do see it from a number of different angles. I mean, there are people who think that the system needs to just be disrupted and shaken up, and anyone who shakes it up must be doing something good. That goes as far as it goes. And there are others who really think that he is going to somehow save the country. But I would point out that he hasn't done so yet, and also it is my contention that perhaps more so than ever, though this has, I think, always been true, that the president is a figurehead, and they are like the marionette dancing around. That's a little bit different from a figurehead, but same concept, that they are controlled by someone else. And in terms of picking the winner, which I don't think the people are going to get to do, not especially in a political and media environment where the New York Times can put on page one, forget swing states, micro communities could swing the election. So the popular vote does count within a state to swing the state. And the article on the Times about Pennsylvania being subject to the possible swinging of the entire state by the Poconos. The Poconos. Have you ever heard of the Poconos? Probably once. unless you're from, New York or Pennsylvania. These are little mountains. They're kind of cute. And people go there, going to the Poconos. All right, so the Donald's chart it is actually an interesting chart, particularly given who he is. This person is quite illustrious and has made something of his life, in a manner of speaking. And when you're looking at a chart, you have a number of places to go first. One of them is just where your eye takes you, and you look at that thing and you analyze it out. You tell a little story about that little thing. And there's a good few of those in this chart that could get a result. But a more methodical approach is to look at the ascendant first, the rising sign, the rising degree, in fact, the area around the rising degree, and ask yourself what's going on there. And that's where I'd like to start in this chart. I've marked this off. It's on the left. It's highlighted with a little pink stripe next to the number 29. And then that's Leo right below it, that little lion's mane kind of a thing, and then below that is 58. Donald Trump's chart is timed. It is, I believe there's a birth record in hand somewhere. This is from the era of Lois Rawdon. I don't have that data page open in front of me, but I've verified this data lots of times. And his, in fact, what am I talking about? I've got his birth certificate right on my computer, as provided by astro.com. That's not your ordinary astrology website. That's Astrodienst, one of the best ever. Okay, so, and the whole collection comes from Lois Rawdon's collection, the Astro Data Bank. There is not, and we do need someone to fulfill the role that Lois Rawdon was fulfilling, which is that she could get to anyone or their mother and find out what time the person was born. All right, so when we look at the Donald's rising sign, we find out that he's born not only in late Leo, not only in the last degree of Leo, but 2 arc minutes away, or 1 arc minute away, really, from Virgo. And so he is definitely Leo rising, but this last degree makes him, it is absolutely perfect description of him as this leonine figure. You get a lot of ego with Donald Trump, and you get a lot of this sense that he's the center of the universe, which is not always how Leos proceed. They all have a little bit of this. Their hair is always something special. Pisces is the other sign where the hair is always something special. Everyone talks about Donald's hair, the comb over, we shall overcomb, and all of this stuff. So we know he's Leo rising. That's a fair assessment. But the last degree of Leo rising contains one of my very favorite Sabian symbols of all 360 Sabian symbols, channeled by the Reverend Dr. Mark Edmund Jones and Elsie Wheeler, a wheelchair-bound psychic in a park in San Diego sometime in the 1920s. I've got that. Again, don't have that data right in front of me, but this became the first degree-by-degree symbol system where you get a message from each of the 360 degrees of the zodiac. So, in effect, it turns the zodiac into a tarot spread, which is handy for a lot of reasons, one of them being if you're not that experienced of an astrologer, you can at least get some information from the chart. It is sometimes reliable. I think it's always pretty interesting. Remember, with the Sabian symbols, you always round up. So anything above 2901 is 30 because we're in the 30th degree of the zodiac. And so here we are way, this 30 degrees, right? There's no 0th degree. It's degree 1. So if you're at 0001 degrees, you are in the first degree. So here we are 2958. We are at the 30th degree of Leo, and the Sabian symbol for that degree is an unsealed letter. An unsealed letter. So now we live in a time when there's absolutely no concept of privacy, but there were times when there was a concept of privacy. Now people would steam open letters and do various things to read them, but basically, for the most part, a sealed letter was a sealed letter, and people invented wax seals to make sure that the wax seal wasn't broken. A little drip on the back of the envelope where it met, and these were not these. This was not going on in the days when there were all kinds of polymers and ways to conceal opening an envelope and all this bullshit. So the word seal is a reference to the wax. The letter is open. It is unsealed. It is there for all to read. And I contend that Trump is a completely open book. What you know is true. What you see is what you get. This guy is not concealing anything. He's not really capable of concealing anything. Even the things that he should be concealing, like, for example, his involvement with the mob, are totally open. I can't find the article. Maybe someone can find this for me. But during the first campaign, and this was in a big place like People magazine or something like this, the daughter of a deceased big mobster in the city, whom Trump had disavowed any knowledge of, and the daughter was maybe 25 or something like this back in 2016. And she said, "I am very offended that Trump claims to not know my father. My father lent us his yacht. Lent us his yacht. Lent Trump his yacht for a party, some thing for his kid's sweet 16 or something like this." And she said, "This Trump is a friend of the family. I can't believe he's pretending to not know my father." It all comes out with Trump. And basically, as Tony Baloney as he is, we know who this person is. And by the way, for those who feel they do, who are worried about him, he's a completely known quantity, but I am much more concerned about Vance. Trump is approaching his Uranus return. He's going to turn 80 years old if he's president in the second year of his term. Vance is much more likely to succeed him as president during the first term or after the first term. Of course, certain people seem to live a long time. So this 30th degree of Leo, to me, tells me it's my favorite thing about his chart. And it's up there with my favorite things in any public figure chart. Now, the story goes on. And remember that when the ascendant is that late in the sign, or that early, but late is edgier. He's edgy. He's always on the brink of something. There's not really a feeling of solidity, and he seems to thrive on living on the edge, and he thrives on a kind of transparency that I think is an interesting strategy. He has had to deal with the very challenging astrology that he has. And one of the ways he does it is he puts everything right in your face where you're the least likely to notice it. Now, there's 2 planets involved in the ascendant. I've looked fairly carefully. I haven't gone to 5,000 asteroids, but I'm using the ones I am well familiar with. And right in that degree, written in pencil, it looks like a little planet with rings around it, with the pink arrow pointing up at it. That is Apollo. And Apollo is at 29 Leo, 45 or 43. It's right. It too is right at the end of Leo. Now, Apollo is about making the same mistakes over and over again. And Trump seems to do that, but I think that he has kind of made a brand out of fucking up. I think that he is very good at being a dunce, and he's learned how to make this work. I've never talked to him personally, so I don't have any way to assess his intelligence in my personal evaluation of intelligence, none of which you can tell from media appearances. But he seems to be prone to gaffes, and he then utilizes those And what this does is it gives him a regular guy kind of a feeling. I mean, you'd be amazed how many people like him because he just seems to be a regular guy. And he can even put on a McDonald's uniform and flip a couple of burgers and people fall for it. And everyone knows he's completely full of shit. The Kamala Harris claimed to work at McDonald's. So immediately, what does the Donald do? Is he gets a gig working for 10 minutes at McDonald's. Everyone knows it's complete bullshit, and pretty much everyone falls for it. Okay, so Apollo rising, making the same mistakes over and over again. This is a significant placement in his chart. Next, this too is a very the Donald. Mars is rising, but if we use quadrant houses, not whole sign houses, for a second, because all of Leo is the first house in whole sign houses, that would mean trans-Pluto, Pluto, Mars, Apollo, all that's in the first house. But if we register the fact that Mars is right above the ascendant when he was born, you couldn't see it. It was daylight. It was nearly noon. You couldn't, 10 a.m. standard time. Yeah, spring forward, fall back. Right, so it was born at 9:54 a.m. standard time. It's fully light out. You couldn't see Mars, but it was there right above the horizon. If you could have seen it, it would have been, maybe the width of your hand above the beach if you were looking in the east. And this is the kind of aggressive quality that he has. It's the kind of masculine quality that he has. Trump is kind of masculine, but one of his favorite gestures is jazz hands. I don't know where he gets this from, but I would say that he is kind of aggressive. He is kind of masculine. He is kind of determined in his will. He is all of this kind of stuff is Mars lurking in the 12th, right above the horizon. He's not really sure of anything. I think he's not really sure whether he wants to be president, but he's in so much trouble from all of this other activities. There's so many pending felonies and civil things, and I think that if he does not take office on the 21st, I think he's going to be sentenced to do time in New York. He'll probably be sentenced to be Eastern or someplace right up here. And so it is evocative of someone who is stealthy and passive-aggressive. Now, what's passive aggression? I once went to a therapy session. This has got to be like 25 years ago, and I said, Joe, what is passive aggression? And Joe said, this is typical Joe Trousseau, he said, you'll understand it a lot better if you just take away the word passive. So it's more like stealthy aggression. It's and this is the thing that I think that annoys people the most about him, is that he seems to always be concealing his perfectly transparent motives. Okay, that's the ascendant. Now, I've been yakking here for, we're now 19 minutes in, and all I've talked about is ascendant. Isn't that interesting, right? There's a lot in each of these things. So from the ascendant, we go to the sun, because it's Leo rising. So let's take a look at the sun. Well, the sun is near the north node. Follow the sun up. There's a blue line connecting it down to the moon, slightly on a diagonal. The sun has the number 22. It's a circle with a dot. That's the sun. Congratulations, you can now read astrology. And the sun rules Leo, so we look to the ruler of the ascendant. The ruler of the ascendant, A, is in Gemini. B, is close to the node, the north node. The north node is stationary, direct. I'll come back to that in a second. The node's overall movement is retrograde. But a couple of days a week, maybe a couple of hours on I don't know the exact number of hours that the nodes are direct. It's a special condition. But he's born at a lunar eclipse. You can tell that because the sun is on the north node and the moon is on the south node. And the eclipse is about to happen, like maybe about 2 hours after he was born. So the first thing that happens to Trump after he's born is he experiences a solar eclipse. And this solar eclipse is by secondary progression, very active the first month of his life. You know from this that he had a traumatic first month of his life. His mother somehow was not there. She's either out of the picture, or she's sick, or she's not interested, or she's excluded in some way. You can tell this from the lunar eclipse that takes place 2 hours after his birth in real time, but in progress time, it is taking place over the course of, to me, it looks like, without actually doing the calculations, the first 2 months of his life are very tense and very edgy. And there may be, his own life may have been jeopardized in some way. We don't know that. I have not seen that in any biography, but I have actually never read a biography that would include detailed descriptions of the first 2 months of this infant's life. Now, does anyone know this? Do you read books about Trump? What can you tell me about the first 2 months of his life? I'm telling you there's something special going on there. Now, it is worth noting that both of our primary lead candidates, the Harris and the Trump, both are born at the full moon. Harris has a glaring, glowing full moon chart, very close, and Trump has a glaring, glowing full moon chart that is until the eclipse. When it goes out, it looks like a total lunar eclipse. I have not verified that, but that is checkable. But for our purposes, an eclipse of the moon is an eclipse of the moon. The moon involves mother. The moon involves his personality. There was some kind of a shocking, traumatic event that shaped him into this kind of weird person that he is. And there's, I mean, he's a strange guy, right? He's eccentric, which conceals the strange. He's wealthy, which gives him a pass for being both eccentric and strange. But even on the terms of a powerful rich guy, he's a little odd. And this comes in. Something here enters in those first 2 months of life. He could be some kind of a walk-in. There may be some, people familiar with matters psychic will recognize this, but let's say he had some kind of a near-death experience at a month and a half old, and some other spirit enters his body. It is that kind of chart. Okay, so now we've covered the sun, the moon, and the rising sign. I would note that the asteroid Lilith is exactly conjunct the south node. I don't want to speculate too much about that. We could do a whole reading of this chart in terms of what's the deal with women in his life, but the lunar eclipse at the time of his birth and by progression in the first 2 months sets the scene of his relationships with women, as do other factors in the chart. Okay, so you can see the blue line going between the moon and the sun. That's the full moon. Now let's look at the square that's highlighted in kind of fluorescent yellow. I'm not looking at the scan. I'm looking at the paper chart, but you probably can see this. I'll push the contrast if it somehow doesn't scan properly. The yellow square is a grand square or grand cross. It involves, first of all, if we only look at major and modern planets, the square of Mercury and Neptune. Now, I realize the square is separating. I realize the square is 3 degrees, but Neptune has a very wide orb, and Trump is the classic Mercury square Neptune type. This is a type. And lots of different things in the chart can indicate a sense of mendacity, the behavior of mendacity, not being completely truthful, etc., etc. But the thing that defines, I think, and distinguishes the Mercury square Neptune aspect is they believe their own press releases. And this is a special kind of a person who basically says, I'm going to say something about myself, and then we're all going to accept that that something is true because I believe that it's true, and good liars believe their own lies. But he's a liar, but he's doing a lot of fishing in the public realm for support and for popularity and for all of this. And That's my take on his Mercury square Neptune. So if you have Mercury square Neptune, just have somebody else write your press release for you. And it may not be the glowing kind of a thing that you think you want, but there may not even be press releases involved. But it's like falling for your own self-image. Now, this is politics we're talking about here. And so there's a lot of that in politics. I mean, politics is one huge game of political speech turning night to day and day to night. And also people who are very good at projecting an image that they want people to believe, and then people believe it. That is the entire essence of politics. So it should surprise no one, though it is very interesting, that the asteroid of politics, Pallas Athene, that little diamond-shaped Venus on the lower right-hand side of the chart with the number 11 next to it, with the yellow lines pointing to it from Neptune to the left and Eris above, is Pallas Athene, the asteroid of politics, and it is retrograde. Now, I'm a minor planet person, and I understand the importance of using tight orbs with minor planets, but there are exceptions to every blanket rule. There are plenty of people who won't even consider a minor planet aspect if it's not within 1 degree, but we get a few passes here. First of all, topically, this absolutely works brilliantly. And second, Neptune is involved, and Neptune has this very wide orb of influence in time and in space. You start to feel the influence of a Neptune transit long before you think it's going to matter. And the influence is invisible, and then you don't realize what happens until what's happening till it's already happened, which perfectly describes Trump's spontaneous ascendancy to power in 2016, which pretty much took everyone by shock. The Republicans were all saying, this is impossible, we can't do this, because this is completely selling out the Republican Party. What a complete fucking joke to have blah, 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 blah. But that's it, he became president. And I would note that he became president in 2016, 8 years ago, under the influence of the Uranus-Eris conjunction in Aries. He rode to victory on the psychic, intellectual, physical, emotional chaos of digital technology. Trump is, we could study the chart for all the ways that this is true. I have not done that analysis yet, but Trump is the very epitome of a digital effect. Do digital, do Trump. And I don't just mean tweeting. I mean people who are shocked into a kind of a stupor where this person could seem vaguely qualified, much less appealing to be president of the United States. It is only in a world fully engulfed in its own postmodernity, where words don't have definitions, and to use logic is to use the white man's oppression, blah blah blah, that someone like Trump could become as powerful as he became. In a sense, he is a hack. Not a political hack, but he probably is one too, but rather he kind of hacked the system. Okay, so so now we've got 3 points. I'm trying to describe this grand square, and then I'll just tell you about a couple of more things and hit the eject button. The grand square consists of Mercury. Mercury is, depending on how you count, either in house 12 or house 11. This chart's an interesting study in the way that whole sign houses would overlay with quadrant houses, because it really works both ways. And that's a special, you read that. You don't just pretend that one or the other work. But anyway, skipping back to Mercury. So he's got Mercury up in the 10th and or 11th in Cancer, square Neptune in Libra, opposed by Pallas Athene retrograde in Capricorn. So he's got this pattern, has quite a bit of political content because of Pallas Athene, which brings in that discussion. brings it right in. Okay, finally, this whole thing is also lined up with Eris, goddess of chaos. Now, the numbers on this, Eris at 6, Mercury at 8, Neptune at 5 and change, and all those. It doesn't look like this is a very powerful aspect, but it's there, and it describes what we've experienced with Trump. Like, ultimately, experience is the ultimate test of whether astrology is working. And yeah, sometimes it takes a long time to figure out what was going on, to see the effects of something after it has developed, and charts are like that too. You can keep coming back to the chart every year, and then finally, like the fifth time, you see what's going on. All right, so we have this Grand Cross, and it involves Eris and Neptune, with Mercury involved. These are the word salads. This is the thinking with my gut, Mercury in Cancer, which is basically the Cancer rules the gut, Mercury rules thinking, and here he's just going to open his mouth and say whatever the fuck he says. And I think probably the most fun part about being a journalist on the campaign trail with Trump, I think probably the part that I would enjoy the most would be watching his handlers have heart attacks when he's up on the podium saying whatever the fuck he wants to say. The problem is that no one can argue with this method because the method works. Trump knows how to read a room, and the room he is reading is the room known as the global village. Now, I realize a lot of people listening to this, though I have in the past 8 years picked up a great many listeners who are health freedom people who love my work on viruses and all that. Many of you guys are Trumpers. The first thing anybody who was not a Trumper, who was suddenly thrust onto the world stage of the health freedom movement, dealing with all these other people, all of these kind of sort of conservatives, had to deal with this. There's going to be a lot of Trump supporters at these events. Hello. I learned very early on that you're basically, for the most part, completely sincere people. But that all said, we have a chart that describes the chaos factor indicated by Eris and by Neptune. Both Eris and Neptune are chaos-generating factors, squared by Mercury. Try to put that into words. This is the, says whatever, nobody cares. Nobody cares if it's true. Nobody cares if it's false. It doesn't really matter. We're really talking postmodern here. This is what he gets away with in public, in Cancer, in the 11th house. That's it. He puts himself right out there. And then no matter how many articles the Times writes on Donald Trump goes off the rails and makes another, 90-second word salad, which means absolutely nothing, nobody cares, much less his supporters. They think that's great about him. They think, well, I wouldn't really want to be standing up in front of an audience of 15,000 people, but I respect him for just going up there and saying whatever it is he thinks. That is the zeitgeist, the global village. In previous times, the zeitgeist was be genuinely emotionally moving, or tell me what to do, or make sense. Remember, Global Village has a lot to do with radio. We're now on the internet, which is the ultimate cool medium because it involves all the senses and really emphasizes visual a bit more than the other ones. All right, anyway, so there's this grand square highlighted in yellow. This is Trump, the chaos generating factor on the political scene, and this is the core of his credibility. Go figure. All right, a couple of more bits. The austere quality you get, this slightly squeamish, cheap, doesn't want to touch anything, obsessed by washing his hands, meet the Venus-Saturn conjunction in Cancer. He's got some kind of a mommy complex. I think that, so first of all, Venus Cancer is financially austere. It is austere generally. Again, the aspect is separating, not supposed to be the world's strongest aspect, but it really does describe him. and it describes him not being so good with money. He's not so good with money. That's Venus and Saturn in that kind of for example, a conjunction aspect. Now, to its credit, Vedic astrology loves combinations of Venus and Saturn, and this would still be in the sign Cancer in Vedic astrology. But the reason that Vedic astrology loves combinations of Venus and Saturn is because they are both associated with the sign of utmost importance, Libra, and there Venus is the ruler and Saturn is exalted, and so Vedic astrology, from what I am told, I haven't talked about this with any swamis lately, but the combination can really work. And whatever else you may think about Trump and his complete train wreck of a life with all these felony convictions and being held liable for rape in a civil action and numerous other criminal and civil actions pending against him, sentencing in New York for 20-odd felonies pending, I would say that first of all, this bespeaks this is the kind of train wrecky kind of a thing of Venus and Saturn with all the rest of this going on. But who, if it matters, I think it might, who wants to be president more? Well, Trump's got a lot more to lose if he loses. We haven't heard the last of Kamala Harris if she does not get sworn in on the 20th. But with Trump, it's going to be a lot of sentencing hearings if he's not sworn in. So that's Venus, Saturn, and that is opposed by a centaur, Pholus. It's not colored, but if you look down to the lower right side of the chart, you'll see a green little thing with a flag with the number 24 next to it with the Capricorn sign 24, Cap 48, retrograde. That is Pholus. This is the pressure release. This is the, for example, the we might add to Pholus, and does it matter, the pussy grabbing video. Now, you would think anybody else, October surprise, member of the Bush family, famous journalist, is found to have interviewed Trump, and Trump said, just grab him by the pussy. When you're famous, they let you do that. And the thing goes flying around like a rocket without little wings on it to guide it, and the story is going up and down all over the place. It looks a little like the space shuttle blowing up back in 1986, and then a majority of Caucasian women vote for him. Go feminism. Okay, so that release, that Mentos would someone remind me to go to the supermarket, buy a pack of Mentos and buy a bottle of soda? I've got to try this myself. I promise I'll take pictures. That sudden, uncontained, uncontrolled release is Pholus. But does it go anywhere? Did anything happen? Okay, a couple of more things here. One very interesting bit is he has got Chiron and Juno in a conjunction. This is a kind of a catastrophic marriage placement. Now, it could work in some ways, but his marriages always turn into these huge tales of intrigue. That's one place where we don't know the half of it. The intrigue, if you follow the orange lines up to the upper right part of the chart, upperish part of the right part, that little thing I drew with like a wagon wheel, that's actually Arachne. It's supposed to be a spider web. That's the asteroid of conspiracies and also of writing. Anything else? Psyche in mid. Look, psychologically, this guy is a mess. Spiritually, this guy is a mess. After hanging out with this chart for a couple of days, and I didn't look back, by the way, on my old reading, which I'm going to include. I think that this is someone who has always been a woman in lifetime after lifetime, who reincarnated as a man for the first time and said, now I'm going to be a manly man and do all kinds of badly things. But for the last 500 lifetimes, he was female. And this is a plausible kind of a result. Last bit, Nessus up there on top right, blue N with a 9 next to it, square Pluto. He's in the end, I think, is always going to experience the worst results of his intense gravitation toward power. That is Nessus square Pluto. That is generational. Pretty much everybody in the mid-40s is going to have that. I haven't studied that one particularly previously. If anyone has anything to add, I would be most curious to hear about it. And that is my reading of Donald J. Trump's chart. We now have the two major candidates and the chart for the inauguration. I really should do a rereading of that chart soon, so I will do that next before the election, and I do promise a reading of the election day chart. All right, signing off from Kingston, New York. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. And bye for now.